What's up nakamas? Welcome back to the channel. For today, we have a spicy deck tech with a new leader that we're going to be featuring for this channel, Boa Hancock. So I'm going to quickly share my deck list and show some gameplay on how I pilot this deck using the simulator. So first things first, let us map all our cards here so that it will be easier to explain. So here's the deck list. It's been quite a while since I posted a deck list, but what I usually do is that I make sure that I own the cards before I can do a proper deck profile. That way I'm able to really play with them and bring them to a tournament or so, have some experience on how to pilot the deck before actually featuring here in the channel. That's why it's taking some time for me to do some deck techs. So first things first, we have our leader, Boa Hancock. This is a new OP07 leader. We just got her, and the ability is once per turn during your turn, you may activate this when a character leaves play from one of your abilities, and if you have 5 cards or less in your hand, you draw a card. First card, we are running 4 copies of Sengoku. He's our searcher for our 7 Warlords of the Sea cards. Then I'm running 4 copies of the 3-cost Don Quixote do Flamingo. Basically our blocker, and the on-play effect for this allows us to manipulate the top 5 cards of our top deck and return it either to the top or to the bottom. Next, we have 4 copies of the 4-cost Moria. This is the ST03 Moria. So Moria has an on-play effect to add 1 7 Warlords of the Sea card or a Thriller Bark Pirate character card with a cost 4 or less other than Gecko Moria from our trash to our hand. 3 copies of the 4-cost Mihawk. It's basically here as a 2k counter, but it is also a good target to drop off of Jinbei. It has a draw 2 and discard 2 effect, which comes as a bonus. Then we have the 4-cost Crocodile. This is also another 2k counter on the deck. This is a new uncommon from OP07. On play, we may pay 1 if we do return up to 1 2-cost or lower character to its owner's hand. Then we are running 2 different types of Charlotte Pudding here. The first one is the 2-cost one from ST12. Functions as a 2k counter, although it has an activate main effect to return this to our owner's hand, which can work pretty well with our leader's effect. Next, we have our OP07 Law, a 4-cost and also a 2k counter. It has an activate main that we may return this to our hand. The opponent will place 1 card from their hand on the bottom of their deck if they have 6 or more cards in their hand. And before I forget, I'm also running 2 copies of the 4-cost Charlotte Pudding. So the on-play effect of this is that our opponent will return all their cards in their hand to their deck and shuffles their deck. Then they will draw a new 5-card hand. Then we are running 2 copies of Edward Weevil. This is a 4-cost 6k. No counter, but it draws a card. If we used our 4 Dawn turn to drop a Jinbei, then drop this and draw a card, that would be pretty awesome. Next is 2 copies of Mihawk. So the on-play effect of this is to bottom deck a 7 or less cost character. 4 copies of the 7-cost Gravity Blade Raging Tiger. This bottom decks 2 characters with cost 6 or less. 3 copies of Gomu Gomu no Red Rock. So this is a 6-cost event that allows us to bottom deck any 1 character. Next, we are running 4 copies of the new SR Jinbei from OP07. This is one of my favorite cards in the deck actually. So it's a 4-cost 5k that allows us to play 1 cost 4 or lower 7 Warlords of the Sea character other than Jinbei from our hand. And the way we design the deck is that we have a lot of 4-drop 5k and a 4-drop 6k, so we can maximize the effect of Jinbei. 4 copies of the OP07 SR Boa Hancock, 6-cost 8k attacker. One of our opponent's characters other than Monkey D. Luffy cannot attack on their next turn. Then we can place up to 1 cost 1 or less character on the bottom of its owner's deck. Last but not the least, I'm running 4 copies of the 10-cost Kaido. the secret rare from OP05. This is a 12,000 attacker, allows us to draw 4 cards if our opponent has 3 or less life. So that's it for my deck list. Let's see this deck in action. Okay, for our first game, we are against Red-Green Law. Not much used nowadays, but the Red-Green Law is actually a pretty good deck still because it can flood the board really quick. Opponent attack here, we take. So our objective is to basically also be aggressive here. So let's drop a Jinbei and Law. Let's not activate Law because we want bodies on the board. So here I used counter. So opponent dropping lots of units here and is already online. So we want to focus trying to remove some of his characters. We can't do anything with our hand, so let's just be aggressive here by attacking 6 and 5. Trying to remove as much from our opponent's hand. Okay, opponent block there. So we have still 4 Dawns. Let's just try to flood the board. I'm looking for the event though. But since it's not there off of Duffy, I put everything at the back. At the bottom, I mean. Opponent attacks for 8 here. We're willing to take that. And removes our second copy of Jinbei. That's pretty unfortunate. So we have 8 Dawn here. We can Red Rock. So let's just try to attack this. Because this is a pretty strong card whenever it attacks. So let's just remove there, and off of our leader's effect, we draw 1 card. Oh, Zoro. So our opponent does a pretty good job of maintaining 5 units here. So at this point, we're not gonna be able to use Pudding anyway, so I just use her as a counter. 7k attack, we're taking that. Rook here coming in for 5. At this point, I just block and save our Duffy. And this one, we wouldn't be able to guard that, so let's just take that. And another rush character. Or our opponent didn't attack, so we would be able to remove both Luffy and Zoro here and draw a card. Unfortunately, we only have 3, but I didn't want to attack the life, so I just attacked for 5 here off of the Brook. Our opponent would not be able to defend that anyway, and opted not to use our Dawn. Although this is just for bluffing purposes only, but we don't have any counters, events that counter. So our opponent removes our Jinbei and we take this 7k attack. Then we can just drop a Kaido here and attack Zoro, hoping to remove this chopper. Yes, and our opponent blocked at this point. So we are at 2 life with a bunch of cards, so we can defend this Zoro attack. Using 2 cards up to 8k here with a 3k counter. And we can also defend here. I opted to save the Duffy so that I can Red Rock and Duffy as an option. But here our opponent dropped a Law, so I changed my strategy a little bit. I just attacked for 6 here. Then attack here hoping our opponent will block, but our opponent took it. So I just opted for a Hancock here and a Doffy for a blocker, and we do have our favorite events, 2 of them actually, and moving them on top. Thus, we can remove the blocker law next turn. So our opponent still is doing a pretty good job here. Okay, dropping the 5-cost Luffy off of the leader's effect. I really like the shambles effect of this law. And now, dropping a Zoro, attacking us for 6. Let's block that. So we are in a pretty good situation here, and we win. For the second game against Bonnie, I think this is a good matchup because there's a lot of Bonnies in Japan right now and in the tournaments. So I opted to draw Jinbei here, and we can drop another Sengoku. This point I wanted some removal. I used Mihawk. Now we got a red rock, so I opted to use a trigger and remove the blocker here. The reason for that is on the sixth dawn turn, since we have 2 Jinbeis, I think it's better to just drop Jinbeis and flood the board and be aggressive before our opponent stabilizes. So we drop 2 bodies, 2 5k bodies here. Opponent attacking Sengoku, that's okay. And we got a Boa Hancock, but I still opted to use Jinbei here and dropping Law and activating Law for our opponent to remove 1 card. So we want this Gravity Blade, but unfortunately we are not able to get it. So let's just get Moria here because Moria has a counter. At this point, I noticed that our opponent was able to use Bonnie's ability twice, but I just let it go for now. But I'm pretty much confused because Bonnie's ability can only be activated once. And at this point, I didn't know that there was a bug in the simulator. But still, the game goes on. Our opponent attacks our Moria here. We wanted to save that before our opponent drops some Hawkins or stabilizes the board with like the top ends of this Bonnie deck like Doffy. I just wanted to pressure the board early and tried to save our characters so that we can be pretty aggressive and keep on attacking. So let's attack baby 5 here first. Let's remove that because that can get pretty annoying. That's a very good card that keeps on drawing cards. So Cavendish, we want to definitely get rid of this. So let's just try attacking this for 7, leaving us with 6 Dawn so that we can drop Hancock. So the trigger for Cavendish is on play and on attack. So even if our opponent saved it here, we can just let that go, attack, keep on attacking the life, and dropping a Boa Hancock here to disable Cavendish from attacking. That way, opponent won't be able to untap 2 Dawns. So let's take that. We do have a Mihawk to use for the next turn. So we can get rid of that Cavendish. Okay, opponent dropping a blocker here and attacking for 8k on our Moria. It's okay. So I just opted to remove the Cavendish here and draw a card of our leader's effect, because that can get pretty annoying. So I made a mistake here with attacking with Jinbei. We wanted to attack with Blue Hancock first because that would mean more damage. But since our opponent took that damage, it didn't pretty much affect our game. But here again, our opponent tapping Mihawk for the second activation of the leader's ability. So I chatted here that, is there a bug? Our opponent said no. Okay, so the game goes on. But I'm quite confused because our opponent was able to use the ability twice, and that would put us in a pretty much disadvantage. So let's, again, the gameplay here is to save our attackers. We drew our Gravity Blade here, so we can remove the blocker. And now we drew some Kaidos. Let's just attack here for 8. Hopefully next turn we are in a pretty good situation here. We are still at 4 and a bunch of attackers, but of course with the bug, our opponent can still tap two of our characters, so it gets pretty difficult. So we can't defend that, so we lose our Mihawk. But for this one, let's defend this. And we did get a red rock though. We can get rid of the Doffy, or because that can get pretty annoying. So here I just try to attack and try to remove these blockers. So our opponent taps 2 of our attackers here. It could have been different if there was no bug. That way I can leave a Sengoku for another attack. But knowing that there's a bug, I just opted to use the 4 Dons on Hancock and our leader. So we are in a pretty good situation here. I think our opponent is just trying to look for blockers at this point. So let's lose that Jinbei. As long as our opponent doesn't drop a blocker, we are in pretty good shape here. So we just attack with everything for 15k leader attack here, and we win the game. That's it for this video. I hope you like the deck tech and the gameplay on how I pilot this deck. If you're still watching up to this point, then you're not just a nakama, you're a super nakama, and I'm very thankful for you. That's it for this video. See you in the next one.